It is long past dark, and one place by the fire is empty. Someone walked out this morning, and they have not come back. There are no phones, no police, no number to call. There is only the fire, the wall of black trees pressing in around it, and a group of people staring at the gap where a face should be. This was one of the oldest fears a human being ever felt. Not a monster, not an enemy with a spear. Just this: someone is gone, and nobody knows where. And for almost all of human history, it happened constantly. A child chased a bird past the tree line, and the forest closed behind them. A hunter followed a deer over a ridge and never came back over the top. A woman went to the river for water, and the path home simply swallowed her. In a small band of 30 or 40 people, every single person was the whole world. A missing child was the future of the tribe, gone in an afternoon. A missing hunter was food off the fire, and one less body standing between everyone and the dark. A missing elder might be the only person alive who still remembered where the water ran in a dry year. So when someone did not come back, everything stopped. The talking stopped, the eating stopped, and a desperate ancient machine switched on. The search. No maps, no flashlights, no way to shout across a valley. Just human eyes, human ears, and a fear old enough to be carved into your bones. And understand what that fire really was. It was not just warmth. It was the one bright island of safety in 1,000 miles of dark. And the people gathered around it were the only thing in the entire world that would ever come looking for you. There was no system out beyond them. No service. No stranger who would help. If your own people did not find you, nobody would. The whole of your safety net was a few dozen faces and a fire on the ground. So what did they actually do out there with nothing but each other? More than you would ever guess. And some of it you still do today without anyone ever teaching you how. Here is the first brutal thing to understand. When someone went missing in the ancient world, the clock did not start ticking in days. It started ticking in hours. Think about what a lost person was actually up against. The moment the sun went down, the temperature fell off a cliff. A warm afternoon turned into a killing cold by the middle of the night, and a person alone, with no fire, had nothing to hold the heat in. Many of the missing did not die of anything dramatic. They simply got cold and stopped. Then there was water. A human body can push on for weeks without food, but only about 3 days without water. A lost forager, panicking in the heat, burned through their reserves fast. By the second day, they were not thinking clearly anymore. And that points at the strangest danger of all: panic. We know now that people who get lost tend to do something almost unbelievable. They walk in circles, without a clear landmark to aim at. A frightened human will drift, curve, and cross their own path again and again, sometimes for miles, certain the whole time that they are heading straight home. Fear makes a lost person their own worst enemy. And the night belonged to something else. When the light died, the predators came up out of the dark, and they were built for exactly this. A single human, no fire, no group, no spear raised in warning, was not a frightening thing. They were an opportunity. Now make it a small child, a wandering toddler, soft and slow and quiet, rarely survived a single night alone in that world. Everyone in the band knew this. Nobody had to say it out loud. So a search was never calm. It was a sprint against the sunset. Find them before dark, or very likely, do not find them at all. But before we get to how they searched, there is a stranger question. How did a person vanish so completely in the first place, in a world they knew far better than you know your own street? The answer is that the land was full of quiet ways to take a person, and most of them gave no warning at all. The most common was simply a fall, a wet rock on a slope, a crumbling ledge over a gorge, a loose stone on a high-game trail. One bad step, far from camp, and a hunter was at the bottom of a ravine with a broken leg, unable to climb out and unable to be heard. No struggle a tracker could read, just a person who walked over a rise and was suddenly gone. Water took countless others. A river that looked calm on top could hide a brutal current underneath. A person slipped while crossing, or while reaching for water, and the river carried them away in seconds and left no trail at all. To the people back at camp, it was as if the world had simply erased them. In some places, the ground itself was the trap. A bright green patch of bog that looked like solid meadow, but swallowed a leg to the knee, then the waist. A cave that branched and branched, until a curious explorer could not find the way back to the light. And then there was the weather. A sudden fog, a snow squall, a whiteout that erased every landmark in minutes. One moment, you could see the hills that told you where home was. The next, you were standing in a featureless gray wall, with no idea which way was which, and that terrible circling instinct already pulling at your feet. The land did not need to be cruel. It only needed you to make one small mistake, on one ordinary day. So how did they find anyone, with no technology at all? The first tool was something we have almost completely lost. They knew you. In a band that small, everyone knew everyone's habits down to the bone. They knew which way you walked at dawn. They knew the berry slope you liked, the bend in the river where you fished, the ridge the hunters always crossed. So the search did not start from nothing. It started from a map that lived inside every head in the group. The moment you were late, they already knew the 3 or 4 places you were most likely to be. Then came the real skill: tracking. These were people who could read the ground like a page of writing. The same eyes that followed a wounded animal for miles could follow a human just as easily. A single footprint in soft earth told them which way you went, how fast, and how long ago. A bent blade of grass, still slowly springing back up, said you passed minutes ago, not hours. A snapped twig at shoulder height. A smear of mud on a stone. A scuff where a foot slipped. To us, all of it is invisible. To them, it was a line of breadcrumbs lit up in the dirt. The best of them seemed almost supernatural. A great tracker could glance at a print and tell you the person was tired, or carrying something heavy, or already hurt. They could age a trail to within an hour, just by how dry the crushed earth had become. They read the bad signs too. A spot of blood, a patch of ground torn up in a struggle, drag marks leading away into the brush. A tracker could often tell, long before the rest of the party caught up, whether they were going to find a lost person or find an answer. This was the hunter's gift, turned around and pointed at saving one of their own. But a human tracker, as good as they were, had one hard limit. They could only follow what they could see. And then, at some point deep in our story, we picked up a partner who could follow what we could not even imagine. The dog. When wolves slowly became dogs, tens of thousands of years ago, a search party suddenly gained a nose. And a dog's nose is not a slightly better version of yours. It is a different sense entirely. Where a human tracker sees a faint print in the mud, a dog smells a bright, glowing ribbon of scent hanging in the air and soaking into the ground, left behind by every step a person takes. A dog could follow that trail at a run, in the dark, across rock where there were no prints at all, through brush a person could barely push into. It could tell fresh scent from old. It could work long after the light was gone, and a human tracker had been forced to stop. Think about what that meant for a missing child. A man on foot might search one slope before nightfall. A dog could sweep that same ground in a fraction of the time, head down, pulling on the trail, locked onto a scent that led straight to a small body curled under a bush, too cold and too frightened to even call out. And a dog did something else. It made noise. A barking dog that found someone became a beacon, a sound the whole search line could run toward through the trees. It is no accident that we fell in love with this animal. For a huge stretch of human history, a good dog was not a pet. It was the difference between a search that found you and a search that found nothing at all. Still, a trail only helps if you are close enough to be on it. The land was huge, and a lost person could be a long way off. So the ancient world turned the air itself into a rope. Sound. A human voice does not carry far through thick forest, but a sharp, high call cuts straight through it. So searchers spread out in a long line, far enough apart to cover ground, but close enough to always hear the next person, and they called. Whistles, long rising cries, a shout passed down the line, one person to the next, so a single call could travel across a whole valley in seconds, handed along like a bucket of water. Some peoples built this into something astonishing. In a few mountain places, humans developed entire whistled languages, able to send real, detailed messages across miles of valley where a normal shout would die in the wind. Imagine being the lost one, half frozen, and hearing your own name come whistling over the hills. By night they switched to light. A fire built high on a hilltop became a beacon you could see for miles. If you were lost in the dark and you caught that orange glow, you suddenly knew exactly where home was. By day they fed the fire green leaves and damp wood to make it smoke, a gray column standing straight up against the sky that said, quietly and clearly, "We are here." And they left a trail behind themselves as they searched. A stack of stones, a sapling bent and tied, a fresh scar cut into pale bark. These were messages for two people at once, for the searchers, so they did not cover the same ground twice or get lost themselves in the dark, and for the missing person, in case they stumbled onto a marker and followed it like a thread all the way back to the fire. But the searchers were only half of it. The lost person was not helpless either, and the ones who survived usually did a few simple things right. The first was the hardest. Do not panic. A calm person stays put or moves with a plan. A panicking person runs, sweats out their water, and walks in circles until they drop. Staying calm was, quite literally, staying alive. The second was to get high. Climb the nearest hill or tall tree and look. You are searching for one thing above all others. Smoke. A thin gray line on the horizon meant people, and people meant fire, water, and home. The third was a piece of wisdom carried by almost every people on Earth. Follow the water. Find a trickle. Follow it downhill until it joins a stream. Follow the stream until it becomes a river. Water flows downhill, and downhill, sooner or later, is where people are. A lost person who simply followed water gave themselves a real chance. And the fourth was to be found. Stop by something a searcher cannot miss. A strange rock, a lone tree on a ridge, a riverbank. Stay there. Make noise. Answer every distant call. Build a small smoky fire if you can. A moving target is almost impossible to find. A person sitting still by a landmark making smoke is not. There were quieter rules too, learned over countless lives lost. Ration your water. Do not gulp it all in the first hour of fear. Do not travel at night, when one more bad step in the dark could finish what being lost had started. Cover up, keep warm, and wait for the light. Survival out there was rarely about doing something brave. It was about not doing the small, panicked, fatal thing. This is exactly why, the moment a child could walk, the band began teaching them the land. Know your landmarks. If you are lost, follow the river home. Climb high and look for our smoke. It was not a lesson on a page. It was a survival map, pressed into a small child's mind by people who knew, better than anyone, how easy it was to disappear. And now we come to the hardest part of this whole story. The part nobody likes to think about. Sometimes the search had to stop. A modern search team can look for weeks. They have helicopters, supplies, fresh people driving in from everywhere, lights that turn night into day. An ancient band had none of that. They had themselves, and that was the entire world. Every hour those 40 people spent combing the forest for one lost soul was an hour nobody was hunting. Nobody was gathering. Nobody was guarding the camp, or minding the other children, or filling the water skins. A band could not simply stop living to search forever. If they did, the search for one person could quietly kill everybody else. So there was a line, unspoken but real. After a day, maybe two, maybe three, the brutal arithmetic of survival took over. The chance of finding the missing person alive fell with every hour, and at some point it dropped below the cost of looking. And someone, usually the oldest and most respected voice in the group, had to say the thing nobody wanted to say. We have to stop. Picture being the parent in that moment, being told that the group will not look for your child anymore, not because anyone stopped caring, but because the living still had to eat, and the cold was coming again tonight, and there were other mouths around the fire that were still here and still breathing. That was survival. It was not cruel because they were cruel. It was cruel because the world gave them no kinder choice. To save the many, they sometimes had to let go of the one. And then they had to keep walking, carrying it with no grave and no goodbye. But here is the thing about stopping. When the search ended, there was almost never a body. No answer, just an empty space where a person used to be, and a silence that never really closed. Human beings cannot live with that kind of silence. We need the story to end. So all over the world, people filled that gap the only way they could, with stories. This is where so much of our oldest myth quietly comes from. The missing were not just dead. They were taken, pulled under the water by something below the surface, called away into the forest by spirits, lured up the mountain by voices. A child who vanished had been swapped, stolen, carried off into another world. Almost every old culture has these tales, and they are not really about monsters at all. They are about grief. They are what you tell yourself when someone walks into the trees, and the trees never give them back. And sometimes the truth was just as dark, but human. A missing hunter had not been taken by a spirit. He had been taken by another band. Out beyond the edges of the world you knew, there were other people, and not all of them were friendly. Some of the missing were captured, or killed in a fight nobody at home would ever hear about. But every so often, the impossible happened. Someone came stumbling back, days later, thin and wild-eyed and half dead, but alive. And the whole camp would erupt, because the dead had walked back out of the trees. That, more than anything, is why the searches never lost their fire, because every band had a story of the one who returned. That tiny, stubborn hope was enough to send people running into the dark, again and again, for tens of thousands of years. So think about what happens in you even now, when a child goes quiet in a shop and you cannot see them. That cold drop in your stomach, that instant total focus where nothing else exists. You did not learn that. It was handed to you, down a long line of people who could not afford to lose a single one of their own. We are the descendants of the searchers, the ones who could not let go, who read the ground and called into the valley, and lit the fire on the hill, and went back out one more time. And the reason being lost still frightens us, all these years later, is that for almost everyone who came before you, it was the line between life and death. You would have searched too. You would have done exactly the same.